we're all here today because we believe in a common cause. You know, you can go across this room and talk to people who come from different states in our country, that come from different backgrounds, that different education levels, that may have differing opinions on a broad array of issues. But we come here today in this time in our country's history in a common cause. And I see that common cause as being exactly what Ambassador Fox talked about in his remarks. We recognize that America is starving for leadership. That America, for one of the first times in the last number of decades, feels adrift. Feels as if there is no one with their hand on the ship of state. That we are no longer a country of initiators, but we are a country of reactors. That we travel and watch the issues that are coming around the world, whether it's nuclear proliferation in Iran, financial disaster in Europe, or growing competition from China. And I think all of us feel, reluctantly feel, in our hearts, that America, for the first time in our memory, is no longer driving events, but is reacting to events. And the only relief for this feeling of drift, the only sense of purpose that we can all have, is the understanding that this is still the greatest country in the world when it comes to self-determination. All of the problems that we have, because of the extraordinary system of government we've been bequeathed, are there for us to fix. For us to fix. Not to wait for someone else, but for us to do it. We have a Congress today who do not speak to each other, but speak at each other. Do not try to come together to solve problems. They are pandering to the lowest common denominator. And we have in the White House a president who does not have the first idea of how to use executive leadership, or I believe, any significant interest in learning anytime soon. And if you need any further example, I thought it was just fortuitous. Every time I think I'm going to run out of things to say about the President of the United States, he opens up his mouth again. And I don't know if all of you saw this morning the fawning by the liberal media about yesterday's speech by the President, where the President of the United States invoked and indeed analogized himself to Theodore Roosevelt. Now, I didn't want to just come here today and speak off the top of my head about why that analogy is both so ridiculous and so instructive for what's wrong with this administration, as a result, what's wrong with America. So I decided to really read the President's speech on my way here today, and also think about the things that I've learned over the years about President Theodore Roosevelt. Now, the President yesterday said this, and there were lots of quotes I could have used from that speech, but here's the one we're going to try out today. It's a quote from the President of the United States. "But we need to meet the moment. We need to up our game. And we need to remember that we can only do that together." Okay. I would like to remind the President that today is December 7th, 2011, not January 20th, 2009. He is way late to the game. Way late to the game of leadership in America. But that's okay. Every politician, myself included, at times uses lofty rhetoric to refer to themselves, and we tend to give them a bit of a pass if later on they can point to some concrete accomplishments, which at least gets them in the neighborhood of the lofty rhetoric. You know, for you baseball fans out there, it's like the neighborhood play on the double play up the middle, right? You know, the shortstop and the second base doesn't have to be right on the base, but in the neighborhood. We give politicians that leeway too. And so we won't call the person safe at second, because they missed the bag, unless they're way away from the bag. I suggest to you that yesterday, when this president compares himself to Teddy Roosevelt, when this president reminds us that we need to meet the moment and up our game, he fails the leeway of the neighborhood play. I challenge all of you to go online. Go online when you leave this event today and get this speech, because it is important to read. It is important to read, because what I want you to do, I'm going to give you a homework assignment. A homework assignment, believe me. If we give you a homework assignment from New Jersey, we will be checked. I think you're going to be able to get away with not doing it. I challenge all of you to search the speech, search the rest of the speech, for any concrete accomplishments that would line up with the words he used. Let's just use this quote. We need to meet the moment. Well, Mr. President, we need a leader who will lead us to the moment, who will help define what the challenges of meeting the moment means, and then not to be cautious and safe and sit back and wait for someone else to do the hard work, but to get out of your chair and start doing the hard work yourself to make America a greater place. We need to up our game. First of all, candidly, I never thought I'd hear a president of the United States talking about upping our game. Apparently, the formality of the presidency has now completely left 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, but let's go with it. We need to up our game. I would respectfully suggest that this president has had every opportunity to up his game for 3 years, and he has been on the bench. On the bench. Now that's rhetoric, right? That's rhetoric. And so now, under my own rule, which I just enunciated 3 minutes ago, I must now get in the neighborhood of backing that up. So let's do it. The moment, Mr. President, came in September of 2008, when our country entered one of its greatest financial crises in its history. And you promised the American people that you were going to lead us from this crisis with bold and strong leadership that represented, repeat after me, hope and change. What's happened? He became president in January of 2009, and his solution to bold leadership was to hand over a stimulus package to Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid to fulfill every liberal fantasy they had not been able to fulfill during the 8 years of the Bush administration. Mr. President, that is not meeting the moment. He then proceeded to use Chicago ward politics tactics to jam down the throats of the American people in the United States Congress a health care bill that nobody wants, that nobody needs, and that I believe will be found unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court. Handing that task for almost the entire 18 months that he tortured us with it to Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, till in the end, he sent Joe Biden in to finish the job. Mr. President, I would respectfully suggest that's not upping our game. He gave us false hope, as he often does, when he asked two distinguished Americans, Alan Simpson and Erskine Bowles, to deal with what is the seminal issue of our time, the debt and deficit of this country. And he encouraged Republicans and Democrats on that committee to come together in a bipartisan way to support, to solve the solutions that we need to get our country out of this situation. He told them to do it and he would be there for them. He created the commission. And then the commission comes forward with what I believe is a good report. Do I agree with every bit of it? No, I do not. But here's what I understand about leadership, and you do too, but the president does not. There is a boulevard between compromising your principles and getting everything you want. And sometimes, depending on the issue, that boulevard is broader or more narrow. But the job of an executive leader is to find your way onto the boulevard to make progress for the people of our country. Instead, what did this president do? The minute that report was issued, the president put it on a shelf to collect dust. And not because he doesn't think the ideas were good or worthy of debate and discussion. It is because of his own self-interested political timidity that he didn't deal with that report. With all due respect, Mr. President, that's not up in your game, and that's not meeting the moment. And now, we watch the way the president attempts to lead our country around the world. And we have the sickening feeling that this is a man out of his depth. That by the decisions he's made and the decisions he's avoided, by the friends he's offended and the enemies he's enabled, that this president isn't wrong. He simply doesn't understand. Of all the failures of leadership, this in fact may be the greatest one. We don't expect any president to know everything about everything. We don't expect every president to be an expert in every area of the world or every issue that comes across his desk. But what we do expect is to not have a president who suffers from the need of always having to be the smartest person in the room, who will bring smarter, wiser, better people around to be able to explain those things that he doesn't understand. All of us have those moments in leadership. And if we don't think we do, we're lying. Real leaders not only speak, real leaders listen. Real leaders listen. This president has done too much talking and too little listening when it comes to the affairs of the United States around the world, and he has led us to a diminution in our prestige, both around the world and how we see ourselves. What you say is important. What you do is definitional. And so we watch now the circus of a presidential race. And it is a circus. And we will watch the president and others attempt to distract us. Look over here. This is much nicer. Don't look at the real problems that we have as a country. What we are starving for is someone who will stand up and say, here are the real problems. The solutions stink. They hurt. They're difficult. They're unpleasant. But they are unavoidable. We need a president who's going to stand up and say, I don't care if I have 4 years or 8 years. I want whatever time the American people give me to be time that I spend every day digging us out of the hole that we've left for ourselves. And so I make these observations today because we're living this in New Jersey. We're living it. I was left by my predecessor with $13 billion of deficits in my first 6 months. And choices needed to be made. I did not wait for the legislature to act. We acted through executive leadership to close those gaps. We didn't wait to deal with the problems of the deficits in our pension and health benefit systems in New Jersey in the way that we're waiting nationally to fix Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid until it literally eats us financially alive. We stood up, we made our case, we campaigned around our state for 9 months, and we passed legislation to save $132 billion over the next 30 years in our pension and health benefit system in New Jersey and bring it back to balance. Every step that we've tried to take in New Jersey has had two essential elements to its success. One, that someone has to take the risk of actually putting their ideas out there and standing behind them and fighting for them. And two, is willing to listen to the other side, incorporate some of their ideas as long as they don't compromise your principles, and then get the job done. You know, I have a Democratic legislature, and so I have no choice but to find a way to get on that boulevard between the compromise of your principles and getting everything you want. And sometimes it isn't pleasant. And if you've watched any of what we're doing in New Jersey, it doesn't look so good sometimes either. You know? Senate President called me all kinds of names in the newspaper this past summer after I cut his budget. Names that I can't repeat because this little baby's here. But it's on the front page of the newspaper, so you know, you can go back and look it up if you want. But nothing you'd want to be called, I guarantee you that. The Speaker of the Assembly called me mentally deranged. But you see, in the end, you can't worry about that stuff. Because in the end, we bring ourselves together into a room and we recognize that the people must be put before partisanship, that progress must be put before a party. That's what real leadership is. And so I come here today to say that we, as Republicans, must not only challenge the President of the United States to meet that standard. He has no hope, by the way, of meeting it. He's 3 or 4 years in, it ain't gonna happen. But we must also challenge each and every person of our party who requests our support and our vote for the most important office we can bestow on any of our citizens to meet that same standard. They must stand up and say what they believe in, and they must show you they're willing to fight for it. And they must speak plainly to you and directly. The era of focus group tested, blow-dried answers needs to end. But it cannot be replaced by an era of hyperbole and irresponsible answers that just appeals to the anger and the fear that the American people feel right now. And so it's up to us. I look around in this room and recognize so many of you from fights that we fought together in the past. It's up to us to demand more of the people who stand behind this podium. It's up to us to demand more of the people who ask to lead our country. And it's up to us to set the example each and every day that the President talked about yesterday. In the end, I quarrel little with the beauty of his words. But I do quarrel with the emptiness of his actions. A week or so ago, it seems I got those folks upset because I called the President a bystander in the Oval Office. I make no apologies for that comment. But our obligation now is to make sure that we nominate someone who will live up to the very standards we're demanding from this president and that we're having judged he failed. That's our challenge over the next number of months. If we meet that challenge, if all of us work together to meet it, we will have the better America that Ambassador Fox talked about himself and said is the driving aspiration of this organization. We must support those people in public life who are willing to speak the truth, regardless of the cost. And I'll conclude with this. I'm not just talking the talk, I'm walking the walk. I mean, first of all, I'm a Republican in New Jersey. So, you know what that means. I am playing with house money, everybody. I have no business being there. I'm playing with house money. And so when you're playing with house money, you got a choice. Here's your choice. Your choice is, do you want to tack and turn and calculate and try to figure out what's the most politically acceptable thing to do on each and every issue? Or do you want to say, this is who I am, this is who you voted for, this is what you get? Now, I know you're going to be shocked to hear that I decided to pick the latter. And here are the only things that it can cost you in public life. And I'll personalize it as to New Jersey. You see, I'm getting the big oil painting in the State House. Right? I won. So they're going to paint a big oil painting of me, and they're going to hang it in the State House in New Jersey, if you can believe that. And someday in the future, and I hope I'm blessed as Ambassador Fox and Mrs. Fox are, to have lots of grandchildren, and if I am, someday I'm going to bring those grandchildren to the State House and show them that painting. Because you're never going to believe I was actually governor of New Jersey. And I'm going to bring them there, and I'm going to show them that painting. And I hope they're inquisitive children. And I hope they say to me, Grandpa, what was it like? What did you do? I hope I'll be able to say to them something that goes a little different than this. Because if you decide to do number one, attack and turn, you'd have to say to them, well, first of all, let me point out to you the little brass plaque underneath the painting. Because that's really all we're arguing over now, by the way, is the little brass plaque, because I'm getting the painting. I get to point you to the little brass plaque. I want you to note it says 8 years. That wasn't easy for a Republican in New Jersey. They go, well, what'd you do to get the 8 years, Grandpa? I said, well, you know, I incrementalized. I obfuscated. I compromised my principles, and I gave in on the things I believe in. But I got 8 years, little brass plaque. I hope, rather, I'll be able to say to them, every day I was governor, I worked as hard as I could to make this a place not only where you could afford to live, but where you'd want to live, where you'd want to grow up, and where you'd want to raise my great-grandchildren. And whether it says 4 years or 8 years on that plaque should not matter. What should matter is what you did with the time the people gave you. And so in America, we've got to stop obsessing, respectfully, Mr. President, with the number of years on the little brass plaque onto the painting they'll give you in the White House. And we have to start thinking about what those years mean for us today and what they're going to mean for our children and grandchildren. If we as a party, if you as an organization, and if we as citizens of this country reward that, focus on that, make that our mission, then the greater and better America that Ambassador Fox aspires to now and has aspired to all his life will be within reach for our children and grandchildren. And then we'll be able to say the time we spent in leadership was real leadership and well spent. Thank you all very much.